The Iridian warships loomed over the battered human freighter, their sleek hulls bristling with enough firepower to vaporize the Dauntless with a single volley. Captain Andrew Evans gripped the helm console, his jaw clenched tight. He had to get these supplies to Helios Prime. The human colonists were counting on him, but now, with an Iridian battle fleet demanding his surrender, the odds of reaching the struggling colony seemed impossible. Evans had served in the Human-Iridian War 2 decades ago. He'd seen firsthand the cruelty and arrogance of the Iridians, how they looked down on humans as primitive savages to be conquered and subjugated. The war had left scars on him, body and soul, that had never fully healed. And now, he was face to face again with the enemy he'd hoped to never see again. The Iridian commander, Galen, sneered at Evans over the viewscreen, his scaled features twisted with contempt. "Human, surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Your cargo now belongs to the Iridian Empire." Evans glared back, his gray eyes hard as steel. "I don't think so, Lizard. This cargo is vital medical supplies and food bound for human colonists. Colonists who will die without it. So you'll have to blow me out of the stars before I let you take it." Galen hissed, baring sharp teeth. "That can be arranged, Primate. Your puny ship is no match for Iridian warships." As if on cue, 3 more Iridian vessels dropped out of hyperspace, surrounding the Dauntless. Sleek, predatory shapes, their hulls covered with the latest in advanced weaponry. The Dauntless was a rust bucket by comparison, a relic from another age held together by desperate repairs and sheer stubbornness. Evans ran a hand through his graying hair, mind racing. He was outgunned and outnumbered, but he couldn't just give up, not with the fate of Helios Prime's 20,000 colonists in his hands. If the Iridians took the ship and the supplies, the colony would be defenseless when the Empire invaded and conquered it. Men, women, and children would be enslaved or slaughtered by the merciless Iridians. No, he had to get the supplies through, no matter what. But how could one ancient freighter outrun 4 state-of-the-art alien battleships? A desperate idea began to form. The sensors showed a dense asteroid field nearby. If he could reach it, he might be able to lose the Iridians in the rocks. It was a massive risk, flying a ship through an asteroid field. Most sane captains wouldn't even consider it. But sane captains didn't have to contend with an Imperial battle fleet led by a commander with a grudge against their species. Galen was speaking again. Something about the glorious Iridian stellar navy and the superiority of the Iridian species. But Evans tuned him out. The aliens' arrogance would be his undoing. Evans watched the Iridian ships carefully. Their plasma cannons were charging up, preparing to fire. Targeting locks from a dozen batteries were focusing on the Dauntless. In moments, they would open up, and his ship would be nothing but a flash of molecules in vacuum. The crew was looking at him, waiting for orders. In their eyes, he saw fear, but also grim determination. They knew the stakes as well as he did. All their fates, and the fate of Helios Prime, rested on his next decision. Evans' hand hovered over the control for the emergency thrusters. One twitch would send the Dauntless hurtling into the asteroid field. Chunks of rock and ice, some the size of mountains, spun in a chaotic dance. The ship's hull would be smashed open like an eggshell if they impacted one. But if they stayed on course, the Iridian plasma cannons would rip them apart just as surely. The Iridians were so sure of their superiority, they would never expect a mere human to make such a desperate, reckless move. Evans pushed the throttle forward, the metal hot under his palm. The sublight engines roared, vibrating through the deck plates as they propelled the Dauntless into the heart of the churning asteroid field. The human crew clung to their stations, bracing against the ship's violent juddering. The view screen showed a hellscape of tumbling boulders and whirling shards of rock, any one of which could obliterate the freighter in a blink. Evans' hands flew over the helm controls, sending the ship into a dizzying spiral around a massive spinning asteroid. The inertial dampeners strained to compensate, and the crew fought down nausea from the wild gyrations. "Come on, hold together," Evans muttered under his breath, willing the old ship to endure. The Iridian warships, sleek and deadly, surged after them, their captains goaded into recklessness by Commander Galen's fury. Their shields flared brilliant blue-white as asteroids pummeled them, the impacts growing more vicious as they plunged deeper into the field. Then the trailing warship's luck ran out. Its shields failed with a crackling fizzle, and a jagged asteroid the size of a Corvette slammed into its flank. Iridian alloys crumpled like foil, and the ship cracked open, spilling debris and writhing bodies into the vacuum before a roiling fireball consumed it. "One down," Evans said grimly, but there was no time to celebrate. "Captain, attack drones incoming," the sensor officer called out, her voice tight with tension. Dozens of glittering motes poured from the remaining Iridian ships, resolving into dart-like attack drones as they neared. Their plasma cannons flashed, stitching lines of destruction through the asteroids as they bore down on the Dauntless. The human ship jinked and juked. Evans's flying skills pushed to the limit as he threaded a path through the treacherous asteroid lanes. Proximity alarms blared as the drones closed in, peppering the Dauntless's straining shields with plasma bolts. In engineering, the chief engineer wiped sweat from his eyes, fingers flying over his console. He rerouted power from damaged systems, coaxing every amp he could to bolster the failing shields. The old ship groaned and shuddered around him, the bulkheads shaking fit to shatter. Just as the drones were about to swarm the freighter, the engineer pounded his fist on the control to divert power to the ion drive. Blue-white energy crackled along the ancient engine casing, and the Dauntless surged forward with a bone-jarring lurch. Evans hauled the control yoke, sending the ship into a corkscrew around a planet-sized asteroid. The drones, slower to react, plowed into the massive rock, vanishing in rippling chains of nuclear fire. For a moment, the bridge crew dared to hope, but the respite was short-lived. The Iridian ships had pulled back to the edge of the field, unwilling to risk more losses in the dense asteroids. They waited like hungry tyrannosaurs, patiently stalking their prey. Evans studied his sensor readouts, searching for any advantage. Frustration twisted his mouth. The asteroids were too thick, the Iridian ships too fast. Wait. There. A shimmering distortion, almost lost in the interference of the swirling rocks. The telltale ripple of subspace energies. An unstable jump point, but one that could catapult them away from the Iridians if they hit it just right. Or tear them into their component atoms if they got it wrong. "I have a plan," Evans announced, his voice grim, "but you're not going to like it." Evans' hands danced over the controls, his eyes darting between readouts as he initiated the first critical course adjustment. The bridge crew held their breath, acutely aware that one wrong move could spell doom for them all. "Firing port thrusters in 3, 2, 1. Evans punched the command, and the ship shuddered as the last functioning maneuvering jets sputtered to life. The Dauntless lurched, its trajectory bending ever so slightly. On the main view screen, a tiny dot representing the mining outpost inched closer to their projected path. "How's our power looking, Simmons?" Evans called out, not taking his eyes off the helm. The engineer's voice crackled over the comm, strained and exhausted. "We're running on fumes, Captain. That burst took us down to 18% capacity." Evans grunted, already plotting the next burn. "We'll make it work. Stand by for the next adjustment in 2 minutes." As the seconds ticked by, Evans could feel the weight of 24 lives pressing down on his shoulders. He pushed the thought aside, focusing solely on the intricate dance of vectors and gravitational fields laid out before him. "Firing starboard thrusters, now." Another violent jolt rocked the ship. Warning klaxons blared as hairline fractures spread across the already battered hull. "Hull integrity at 62% and falling," the OPS officer reported, her voice tight with tension. "We can't take much more of this, Captain." Evans ignored her, his attention fixed on the sensors. Their path was curving, bringing them tantalizingly close to the outpost's sphere of influence. But they weren't quite there yet. "One more burn," he muttered. "That's all we need." The minutes crawled by as Evans made minute adjustments, coaxing every ounce of precision from the failing thrusters. Finally, he took a deep breath and keyed the intercom. "All hands brace for final course correction. This is going to be rough." He punched in the commands, and the Dauntless bucked wildly as the last of its maneuvering fuel ignited. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed like the ship might tear itself apart. Then, gradually, the shaking subsided. Evans leaned forward, watching the sensor display with laser focus. The blip representing the outpost inched closer. Closer. "We're in!" he shouted, allowing himself a moment of triumph. "Their gravity wells got us. We're on a collision course, but I can work with that." A ragged cheer went up from the crew, quickly stifled as they returned to their tasks. They weren't out of danger yet. Evans's fingers flew over the console, using what little power remained to fine-tune their approach. The battered Dauntless streaked towards the outpost, a prize thrown by a cosmic giant. "All hands, prepare for emergency docking procedures," Evans barked. "And someone get on the horn to that outpost. Let's hope they're in a hospitable mood." As klaxons wailed and his crew scrambled to their stations, Evans allowed himself a grim smile. They'd escaped the Iridians and cheated death in the void. Now, all they had to do was stick the landing. Evans gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles tightening as he stared at the nav display. The Dauntless drifted through the void, its engines silent, its power reserves depleted. The mining outpost loomed ahead, a lifeline just out of reach. "Simmons, give me a status report," Evans barked into the comm. The chief engineer's voice crackled back, strained and exhausted. "It's not good, Captain. We're running on emergency power only. Life support's down to 6 hours, maybe less." Evans swore under his breath. He turned to his helmsman, Lieutenant Chen. "How's our trajectory looking?" Chen's fingers danced over his console, bringing up a holographic display of their flight path. "We're on course, sir, but without power for final adjustments, we'll overshoot the docking bay by about 200 meters. "Damn it," Evans muttered. He keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the captain. We're approaching the outpost, but we're coming in hot. Brace for potential impact and prepare for emergency EVA procedures." As the crew scrambled to secure loose equipment and don EVA suits, Evans watched the outpost grow larger in the viewscreen. The prefab habitat modules clung to the asteroid's cratered surface like barnacles on a whale. "Any response to our distress signal?" Evans asked the comms officer. "Negative, sir, but there's a lot of interference from the asteroid field. They might not have received it." Evans nodded grimly. "Keep broadcasting. If they don't know we're coming, this is going to be one hell of a surprise." The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Evans felt every second like a physical weight on his chest, each breath precious as their air supply dwindled. Suddenly, Chen called out, "Captain, I've got movement from the outpost. Looks like... Yes, they're extending docking clamps." A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew. Evans allowed himself a small smile of relief. "They see us. Now let's hope they can catch us." As the Dauntless hurtled towards the outpost, Evans watched the massive docking clamps unfold like the arms of a metal giant. It would be a near thing. Their velocity was still too high for a clean capture. "All hands, brace for impact," Evans shouted as the outpost filled their view. The ship shuddered violently as the first docking clamp made contact, screeching against the Dauntless's hull. For a heart-stopping moment, Evans thought they might bounce off. Then the second clamp connected, and the ship's momentum began to bleed away. Metal groaned, and sparks flew as the outpost system strained to slow the massive freighter. Evans and his crew were thrown against their restraints, the inertial dampers long since offline. Finally, with a bone-jarring thud, the Dauntless came to rest against the outpost's docking bay. Emergency klaxons blared as the crew fought to regain their bearings. "Status report," Evans called out, his head still ringing from the impact. "Hull breach on deck 3, came the reply from damage control. "Emergency bulkheads are holding. We've got teams en route to seal it." Evans nodded, then turned to the comms officer. "Get me a channel to the outpost. Let's thank our hosts and see about some repairs." As the bridge crew worked to establish communications, Evans sagged in his chair, the adrenaline ebbing away. They'd made it, by the skin of their teeth. But the Dauntless was crippled, and they were a long way from delivering their vital cargo to Helios Prime. He could only hope the outpost had the resources they needed, and that the Iridians weren't still out there, searching for their prey. The Dauntless lurched violently as Evans fired the emergency thrusters. Alarms blared throughout the ship, their urgent wails drowned out by the grinding screech of metal on metal as the freighter scraped past the first asteroid. "Hold on!" Evans shouted, his hands white-knuckled on the controls. The bridge crew clung to their stations as the ship bucked and shuddered. Lieutenant Chen's voice rose above the cacophony. "Sir, Iridian vessels closing fast. They're launching interceptors." Evans didn't spare a glance at the tactical display. His eyes remained fixed on the treacherous field of asteroids ahead, searching for the gaps that would allow the Dauntless to plow deeper into the maelstrom. A deafening boom shook the ship as an Iridian energy blast found its mark. Sparks showered from ruptured conduits, and acrid smoke filled the air. "Damage report!" Evans barked. "Hull breach on Deck 3, came the frantic response. "Emergency bulkheads engaged, but we're venting atmosphere." Evans gritted his teeth and pushed the battered freighter harder. The Dauntless groaned in protest as it smashed through a cluster of smaller rocks, sending debris pinwheeling into the void. On the sensors, the Iridian fleet spread out in a deadly net, trying to cut off any avenue of escape. But Evans had no intention of running. He plotted a course straight for the heart of their formation. "Sir!" Chen called out, his voice tight with tension. "They've realized what we're doing. The flagship is moving to intercept." Evans allowed himself a grim smile. "Good. Means we've got them scared." Another impact rocked the ship, and this time Evans heard the distinct sound of rending metal. Warning lights flashed across his console as systems failed one by one. "Reactor's going critical!" The chief engineer's panicked voice crackled over the comm. "We can't contain it much longer." "Understood," Evans replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "All hands, prepare for final impact." The Iridian flagship loomed large in the view screen, its sleek hull overflowing with weapons. Evans's finger hovered over the thruster controls, waiting for the perfect moment. Time seemed to slow as the distance closed. Evans could see the alien crew scrambling on their bridge, finally realizing the true nature of the threat bearing down on them. With a final, decisive motion, Evans slammed the controls forward. The Dauntless surged ahead, its hull glowing white-hot from the stress. In the last seconds before impact, Evans turned to his crew. No words were needed. Their eyes met, a lifetime of service and sacrifice communicated in a single look. Then the world exploded in light and fury.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.